Hey everyone, it is Friday, so that means it is time for my weekly MTG Top 10. Over the last few months, I've covered cards that are budget staples in black, white, and blue. This week, we're going to do red. As with the others, this list is made up of cards that I think should make it into most red EDH decks, especially mono-red ones, and especially decks built on a budget. The cards on this list are below $2 in Magic Online and in paper. Prices will accompany each of the cards while I discuss them, and all of them are from MTG Goldfish. Anyway, let's go ahead and get started. At number 10, I have Outpost Siege. One thing red decks, especially mono-red decks, don't have a lot of are repeatable ways to draw cards, but Outpost Siege provides that. There are some decks that also don't mind choosing the Dragons option, but I think you normally want to go with Khans, so you're effectively drawing an extra card every turn. Yes, you have to cast it or play it in the case of a land. The turn it gets exiled to get the use of the card, but red can't draw cards with no drawback, so there has to be some kind of drawback. But seriously, this card can help you win a lot of games thanks to the card advantage it gives you. And at number 9, I have Incendiary Command. It's definitely the weakest of all the commands, but its flexibility is still pretty nice. Doing 4 to a player is not the most useful mode in Commander unless someone happens to be at 4, but doing 2 damage to all creatures, blowing up a non-basic land, and Wheel of Fortuning everybody is pretty solid. I mean, obviously, you have to pick 2 of 3 of those, but any combination of those is definitely, fine. More than fine. I mean, but the flexibility really is what makes this card good. Speaking of flexibility, at number 8, I have Aftershock. Red isn't great at just straight up destroying creatures, and Aftershock provides that. It also provides a lot of flexibility, something that is key in EDH, just as we were talking about, given that you're going to be faced with all kinds of problem permanents, and this one can deal with artifacts and lands too. Granted, those are all kinds of permanents that red has no real problem dealing with, but this card is a single card that can deal with 3 of them, and taking 3 damage is a pretty small problem in EDH since you start at 48, yeah, that'd be cool. At 40 life, that is. So let's go on to number 7, where I have Pyrohemia. It's the red Pestilence. It's a great card in EDH, just as Pestilence is, but it's cheaper. A card that does damage to all players and creatures at an efficient rate is definitely something you want to be running, especially in most red decks. This card can result in tons of lopsided exchanges, like 5-to-1s and so on, and that's just one-on-one, and multiplayer gets even crazier. You can also use it sometimes to just burn out multiple opponents at once. At number 6, I have Fiery Confluence. The Confluences are another nice modal cycle like the commands, and I think another cycle where red probably got the short end of the stick, but that also means that the card is cheaper than the rest of the cycle. Like Incendiary Command, Fiery Confluence has several useful effects. Artifacts are always around in EDH, so destroying 3 of them for 4 mana isn't too bad. The option to do various amounts of damage, and by various I mean between 0 and 3, to all creatures is good too, but again, the option to dome an opponent, at least in this case it's all opponents, still isn't great though. I guess if everyone happens to be at 6, then that's pretty cool, but that's not going to happen very often. Alright, so number 5, I have Vandal Blast. This thing is pretty great because of its overload cost, obviously. It is pretty much the only card in the game, at least in red, that can nuke all the artifacts in play except your own. And this does it for a pretty reasonable cost of 5 mana. And again, artifacts are everywhere in EDH. If you can preserve yours, you want to. And if you can blow up all of your opponents, you absolutely want to. And in a pinch, I guess, if you have to, you can pay 1 red to blow up an artifact, which isn't the worst thing in the world. At number 4, I have Rolling Thunder. This is a great late-game card in EDH. Being able to divide up a large amount of damage with 1 card is obviously a great effect, and this card can turn a lot of games around, either by, wiping your opponent's board, doing a certain amount of damage to them, just making the game turn in your favor. That's something that Rolling Thunder can do in the latter stages of a game in Commander. At number 3, I have Mob Rule. EDH is a format filled with really powerful creatures, and that makes an effect that can steal all the powerful creatures, that is the ones with power 4 or greater until end of turn. It is very powerful, especially in a multiplayer game. You can usually just take out 1 player, maybe more, in a turn if you cast something like Mob Rule. Insurrection is obviously the go-to card for this effect, but it's a little pricey, and Mob Rule is a nice replacement card on a much lower budget. It's also actually easier to cast outside of a mono-red deck. So that's a nice little bonus it has for it as well. But generally, if you can afford Insurrection, it probably is better than Mob Rule. But if you don't want to spend the money on Insurrection, go for Mob Rule. All right, so let's move to number 2. Number 2, I have Volcanic Offering. This card just gives you so much value for your mana. For 5 mana, you get to blow up 1 creature, most likely. You get to do 7 damage to it, and a non-basic land. And if you're playing multiplayer, someone else gets to blow some stuff up. But it'll also probably be things that you are worried about as well. It'll be whatever permanents that whoever it is you let make the decision is most afraid of, whether they're allied with you or it's sort of a free-for-all situation. None of it's going to be yours. They're just going to deal with the most problematic permanents on the table. And, I mean, there's some chance that they just sort of, people are ganging up on you and they just blow up the least valuable permanents on the table, but you're still not losing anything, and most likely they'll be blowing up the best things on the table. And then at number 1, I have Comet Storm. This can just do so much for so much damage for so little mana. It just makes it a great card. Red does have other cards like Star Storm that can do damage to the whole board. Red actually has a ton of cards that do damage to the whole board, and those are good too. Those are fine cards to have in your deck, but I kind of like Comet Storm because it's one-sided. Granted, it doesn't do damage to all creatures automatically or something, or all of your opponents, but the one-sidedness means you can really use it to just take a game over. I mean, you can even dome your opponent with it, which is nice, and that's what I think makes it really good. Just blowing up 3 or 4 creatures and doing 6 damage to your opponent is something that's going to be pretty hard for them to come back from, especially in a one-on-one situation. But it's also good in multiplayer because you can just blow up the 4 best creatures on the table, something like that. I mean, you need to have a lot of mana, but obviously in EDH you're going to have it. The later part of the game is going to come, and that's kind of the point. So that's my pick for the number 1 budget staple for red commander decks. That does it for this week's MTG Top 10. If you found this video useful, don't forget to click the like button below. If you have any questions or think there's cards that I left out or that I'm overrating, let me know in the comments. And if you want to make sure you catch an MTG Top 10 every Friday, don't forget to click the subscribe button below. Thanks for watching.